Hello, this is the Impatient Samurai, and I just want to make a quick video on the current process of jailbreaking the Nintendo Switch, as there's a lot of confusion in the community about some of the specifics of the current scene of Nintendo Switch jailbreaking, what programs to use, what firmwares it's compatible with, etc. So I just want to make a clear and concise guide on everything you need to know about the process of Switch jailbreaking, making an emulated version of your system, also known as EmuNAND or eMMC, downloading custom Homebrew firmware, playing emulators through Retroarch, and most importantly, playing your game backups easily and compatibly, while also giving some explanations of what each part is and its function along the way. So without further ado, let's get started. I'll start off by explaining in essence what jailbreaking is. If you're already familiar with jailbreaking, you can just skip to this time in the video just so you don't have to sit through information you already know. This is just some reassuring information for people who have never jailbroken or aren't too sure about it, so skip to here if you're already familiar. So what is the Switch jailbreak? In essence, it allows you to run code that isn't signed by Nintendo, which basically allows us for the most part to run whatever we want on the system, whether it's endorsed by Nintendo or not. And this allows us to play mods in games, run custom programs like Cheat Engine, remote play, browsing the file system, running emulators, downgrading your games, playing homebrew games, the list goes on and on. So with all these extra features, it's easy to see why people would want to jailbreak their Switch. And lucky for us, there are currently 3 Switch jailbreaks that exist. One is a hardware-sided exploit, one is a software-sided exploit, and one requires a mod chip. We're going to use the much better hardware exploit for this guide, as the software exploit requires you to be on firmware 4.1 or lower, and since the current firmware at the time of this video is 13.1, it's pretty impractical that you'll still be at that version anyway. And with the mod chip, Nintendo sued them for $4 million in a lawsuit for promoting piracy, so it's pretty dang difficult to get your hands on one, and even if you do, you'll be coughing up at the very least like $175 to $200 for it. So it's a much better idea to just go with the easiest, cheapest, and best jailbreak, which is the one we're going to go over, the TEGRA boot ROM exploit. Even though the software exploit was patched and any future software exploits have the potential to be patched by Nintendo, the nature of this exploit means that it's completely unpatchable by Nintendo, so this will work regardless of what firmware you're running and will always stay working no matter what. The TEGRA boot ROM hardware exploit abuses the Switch's recovery mode by overloading the stack that protects the chip's boot ROM, and by doing so, overflows into the boot ROM. And what all that basically means for us is it's allowing us to boot into whatever program we want, which in our case is our custom firmware. And this exploit was found a little over a year after the release of the Switch, so in the first year of Switches, around 2 million or more of the first models of the Switch, this exploit is absolutely possible in all of them. So if you got a model around that time frame, it's almost a guarantee it'll work for you. And luckily, there's a way to check that. The first thing we're going to do to check and see if the Switch we're jailbreaking is one of the lucky few million that is jailbreakable is by going to ismyswitchpatch.com. And all the links to the websites we go over and alternate download links will be in the description. This website basically tells you if your Switch is jailbreakable or not, and was made from a lot of data taken from people's experiences with being able to jailbreak their own Switches, or if they weren't able to jailbreak them. When Nintendo found out about this jailbreak, they made a patch very quickly for the chip at the factory, and slowly went to each factory to use this new patch chip to get rid of the exploit. And it didn't happen instantaneously, so some during this time were made patched, and some could still be jailbroken. And you'll see what I'm talking about here once we actually do some of the listing. When you put in your serial number, you'll get one of 3 outputs. Red means it's unable to be jailbroken with this method, as Nintendo patched all of the models in that range. Orange means it might be patched, but it might not be since it's in that factory chip transitional phase. And most of them in this range are unfortunately patched. But if you own one in this range already, I would try it first, since attempting the jailbreak isn't going to hurt your patched Switch at all. And if it isn't patched, then you're great, you're set to jailbreak. And in the green range, you're 100% of a chance to be able to jailbreak. And if you're looking to buy a switch, look for this serial number, or ask the seller maybe to give you the first 7 digits of the serial number along with the first 3 letters to see if it's a jailbreakable console. And mine just so happens to be in the green, so it's guaranteed to be jailbreakable. If you're looking for where the serial number is on the switch, it should be on the bottom of the switch. As you can see right here, it'll be 3 letters followed by a bunch of numbers, and we're only going to need 7 of those numbers to see if ours is good or not. So I'm going to go put my model number in here and see what it says. So my model number is 007851. And as we can see, the console is not patched. It's in the green, so that means it's guaranteed to work. If yours is in the green or orange, we can attempt the jailbreak. If it's in the red, then I'm sorry, but this method unfortunately isn't going to work for you. Another thing to note here is this only works with Switch version 1s, so if you have a Switch version 2, an OLED, or a Switch Lite, and don't even see the letters on this website that make up your serial number, then unfortunately this method isn't going to work for you. And I'd suggest getting a new console that is jailbreakable and transferring your data over to it if you really want to get a jailbreakable switch. And you can look at this chart here on GBA temp to see which switches are patched and which are unpatched. So this can be kind of like a buying guide for switches. Just stick with the ones in this green range right here. These are the ones that are going to be good and unpatched. I wouldn't risk going with orange ones because most of them in the orange range are going to be patched. It's more of a most likely, not a possibly. So if you are going out to buy one, just look for ones in the green, and you'll be definitely good to go if you get one of those. So now that we know that our switch is jailbreakable, we have some things to prep. So the first thing you're going to need is this USB-A to USB-C cable, and these come with a lot of phones. They're really cheap. They're going to be like $5 or less, and this is what we're going to use to connect the switch to the computer. And the second thing that you're going to need is this RCM jig, and this RCM jig is how we actually put the console into RCM mode, which is how we jailbreak it in the first place. And this bridges pin 1 and pin 10 on the right side of the switch, which enables that kind of hidden feature to put it into RCM mode. And these you can get on eBay, Amazon, Mercari, pretty much any online marketplace for about $5 as well. And the last thing you're going to need is a micro SD card. You're going to need one that's 64 gigabytes or larger. This one I have is 128 gigabytes, which is what we're going to be using. For this one, I recommend 128 gigabytes or larger, but you need at least 64 gigabytes because we're going to be dumping something that's about 30 gigabytes. So I would get something that's a really reliable company. This one is a SanDisk. It's hard to get this to focus to see, but this is SanDisk. I've always had great success with SanDisk. They've never been iffy or they've never corrupted for me. They're really good SD cards that they make, but I wouldn't get one from some cheap, crappy brand that's off-brand and has lots of problems. I'd get something reliable like SanDisk or Samsung, just some trusted brand that you know is going to be good quality. And there's also an optional item that I'll go over at the end that I don't even have yet. But these 3 things are the bare bone necessities that you'll need to get your jailbreak started. So to get started, we're going to change our console's DNS settings to block Nintendo servers. This is just going to be a safety net for our regular system NAND to make sure it doesn't get banned from Nintendo's online services, which we'll keep for our EmuNAND later on, while still allowing us to connect to the internet with our Switch. There's a program we're going to download first to check and see if our network, and by extension the Switch's network, is able to connect to these DNS settings. So if you go to this website here, it's GitLab at 90 DNS. If you scroll all the way down, there's going to be a download 90 DNS tester. So if we just save that and wait for the download to occur, we're just going to open this program up. And the link for all these is going to be in the description, like I said. So when we download this and open it, it's going to check and see. So if it says something like this, just hit more info and run anyway. It's just going to do some DNS checks. It's not going to do anything fancy. So as you can see, it did some tests on the network. So it's safe to use, as it says right here. So if you see this, then that means that the 90 DNS can be used on your Nintendo Switch. If you don't see this, and it says that it's unsafe to use, then I would just keep my Switch offline if I were you. Just to make sure you don't get banned from Nintendo servers. It's always better to be safe than sorry, because you definitely don't want to get banned from Nintendo servers. With the setup that we're using, we're going to be able to go on to Nintendo servers with our regular system NAND, but when we go onto the EmuNAND, we'll have it offline to make sure that our console doesn't get banned. So to change the DNS settings on the Switch, we're going to have to go to our settings here, and we go down to internet settings, and internet settings here. Then it'll search for networks and wait for the networks to pop up. If you're not connected to a network, you have to connect to one before you can change the settings, which is why we do it now before we go into all the Homebrew stuff, so that it's already set up with the DNS before we even start with the EmuNAND and everything. So select the network that you're selected to and connect to it if you already haven't, and hit change settings here. And then you have to scroll down until you see these DNS settings right here. And if you can see, these are the DNS settings that you need for 90 DNS. So if they don't look like this, then they're not correct. So when you put them in, it's good to double check and triple check. Just make sure that they are these settings right here. And make sure that you put in those periods. Make sure you put them in the right spot too, because it won't automatically do that for you. Now these DNS settings can change or become inactive at some point in the future. It's never happened yet, but just to be sure, we're going to download a program later. It's going to be one of the Homebrew programs to verify it for our Switch, so that'll make it easy for us to just double check and make sure that we're still getting blocked from Nintendo servers later. Just remember that these DNS settings are only going to block Nintendo stuff. Every other website will be free to use and won't be blocked in any way, so this just makes you safe from Nintendo while you're online. So now that we have our DNS settings changed, now we're going to start our SD card setup. And we're going to set up our SD card in FAT32 format for this tutorial. The Switch can use either FAT32 or exFAT format, which the Switch will ask to download the drivers for to be able to use the exFAT format. So you'll have to do a system update since it doesn't have that kind of software built into it. But we won't be having to worry about this because this has compatibility issues with Retroarch accessing the file system. And sometimes on rare occasion, it can just randomly corrupt the entire SD card on exFAT format, making most or all of your data get corrupted or lost. And these kinds of things just don't happen with FAT32. And although you can't put any files on it that are larger than 4 gigabytes, because that's just how FAT32 is, we'll have a way around that later in the video for installing your game backups. If your SD card isn't in FAT32 format already, you're going to want to get a program here called Rufus, and this program will turn your SD card into FAT32 format. If you haven't installed any drivers for your SD card for the Switch, it's most likely going to be in FAT32 format already, but a good way to check that is if you go into your Switch and take the SD card out and put it in your computer. You can see I already did that here. If you just right-click it and go to Properties, you'll see which kind of file system it has. As you can see here, this is exFAT format, which we don't want. So we're going to download Rufus here, and we're going to change that. So if we go on here on this Rufus page, should be right at the bottom here. You can just click on this, and it'll just download for you. So once that's downloaded, we can go to where it is and open it up. And if you do have any files on here, if you do have any files on here that you want to back up, make sure you do that before you format it, because when you do, it's going to delete everything on your SD card. So if you just take your files here from the switch SD, I'm going to open a new window for it. And as you can see, I have my normal switch folder here that I don't want to lose. So we're going to get that onto this folder just to back it up. Just put it somewhere that you're going to have to just put it back, because we're going to put it back right away after we format this. So now that I have this open, make sure you click on the correct one. You can see that this is the E right here. So this switch SDE, that is the correct. So make sure you have the right one, or you're going to be formatting the wrong drive that you have in, and you don't want to do that. So when you hit boot selection here, make sure you select non-bootable. And these we don't have to worry about. The switch SD, and make sure you select large FAT32. So, and this cluster size, that's fine as well. We don't need any advanced options, so we can just hit start. And it'll say warning, all data on the device will be destroyed. Make sure you have it backed up before you do this. So now that we have it backed up, we'll just hit OK. And it'll start formatting this into FAT32, which might take a little bit of time, but it shouldn't take too long. It takes longer the bigger your file system is. So now that it's ready, we can just close this, and we can check this. There should be a couple extra things here. You can just delete them because we won't need it. And now if we look at properties, we can see that it's now FAT32. So that's exactly what we want. So we can go back into this switch folder that we had the backup in, and we can just drag that back onto the switch SD card, and now it's formatted without losing any of our files. Now you're going to take your SD card that you made and put it back in your switch, and if you haven't used it yet, you're going to have to put it back in and let it create some of the default files so it's compatible with the file system. So since this one hasn't really been used, I'm going to put this in back in here, close that, and now it says it will use the micro SD. So when you restart it, it will make those files to make it compatible with the switch. And now once it boots up and it's all ready, we can take it back out of the switch and put it back in our PC. And we're going to be doing this probably a few times just to make sure. So now that it's all ready, we can now load it up with some files for our Homebrew. So now that the SD card is back in our computer, we're going to be gathering all of the required files to get the switch jailbroken and set up. And the first website we're going to be going to is called sdsetup.com. And it'll start loading. If this doesn't stop loading and it keeps going, it might be because your VPN is enabled. For some reason, it doesn't really like this site when you have VPNs enabled. So if it isn't loading for you, just turn your VPN off like I have here, and it should work for you. So we're going to select our console. This is the only one, so we're just going to select the switch. This recommended defaults and peg escape is what we're going to select. This will give us most of what we need. So if we select this, so select atmosphere, which this is the most important thing that we're going to download. This is our custom firmware that we're going to be booting into every time we boot up the switch. And this basically lets us run Homebrew on the switch system. Some extra things we're going to check off is this Cosmos toolbox. It's very nice and handy to have. It has some extra things that we can use that's very nice to have. And it's better to have more things that you can do with your switch than not enough. A couple other things that I'd recommend is this checkpoint. This is a save data manager for the switch. And I think it's really handy. It's really nice if you want to back up your saves or download save files that you find online, or if you want to edit your saves. On this JKSV we won't really need, because there's going to be a payload that we inject, the Hekate payload, that basically is this and does all the things that this does, so it's not needed. But this game card installer is needed if you want to download your Switch games onto your SD card from the cartridge format. So this is going to let us download them straight to our Switch, and we're going to go over that later in the video, so we're definitely going to get that. This NX shell is a file system manager for the Switch, so I'm going to get that as well. It's really nice and handy to have. And this we're going to go over in part 2. This is the NX themes installer. So there are some really nice themes to customize our Switch with, and this is a very easy manager and installer for them. So we're going to get this for later. The emulators here, we have Retroarch that we're going to install later, and that basically has all these and more emulators in it. So we won't even need to have these emulators at all, since we'll have everything that we need with Retroarch. And there's 3 payloads that we need: the Hekate payload, the Lockpick RCM payload, and this Fusee primary payload. So make sure this one is checked, because it won't be checked for you. It's now known as just Fusee, and this is what we're going to be going into once the Switch is set up always. It just makes it quicker and easier to go into. This is going to be how we're going to set up the Switch for the most part, is the Hekate. It's very nice utility payload. And this Lockpick is going to how we're going to dump our keys for the Switch, which is going to be good for backing up and also good for some programs to use, because some programs need those Switch keys available for your specific Switch system. So some things that we have over here, this Windows tools, this TEGRA RCM GUI. This is how we're going to install the payloads onto our Switch through our USB. And if you don't have a Windows system, because this is only for Windows, there is an alternative, which is called Fusee Interface TK, and this is going to be for Linux and Mac. So if you have a Linux or a Mac, you're going to be using this. If you have Windows, you're going to be using this. And this one, they both do the same thing, they just inject the payloads. So they're both pretty self-explanatory, but since I have a Windows, I'm going to be downloading this TEGRA RCM GUI. This 4NXCI basically converts XCI format, which is the game card format, basically like an ISO, to NSP format, which is like an eShop format for downloading games. And the downloader that we have, that we're going to use, can just download XCI, so we don't really even need this. A lot of them don't work with XCI format, but the one that we have will just automatically convert it to XCI, so that's very nice to have if you're not using what we're using, but pointless if you have what we have. We won't even need this. So this NS-USBLoader, that is how we're going to be installing our formatted games, or dumped games from the Switch system. We're going to be going through this program and sending them over USB to our Homebrew app. So make sure that you have this checked off as well. And that should be everything. So now that everything is here, we're going to hit to download our zip, and it'll start building. And this will take a little bit. It is around 150 megabytes. So we're going to be downloading this file. Just waiting for it to go. Make sure you have this, you know where it's downloading to. So we have it downloaded. We're going to extract this, and this is what we're going to be just putting on the SD card. I'll explain a couple of the things that we need here to be on the SD card, and a couple of the things that we're going to keep on our Windows PC. So it made the folder, and there's going to be 3 folders for you. One of them is Payloads. This is going to have these 3 payloads. This is what we're going to inject to our console that is in RCM mode. So make sure you have those in a place that you remember. This is PC programs. So this is the NS-USBLoader that we're going to need later, and the TEGRA RCM GUI, and this is how we're going to be installing those payloads later. And this is the SD card. So this is what we're going to be just dragging onto the Switch. These 2 screenshots we don't need, so we can just delete those. I don't know why those are on here, but we won't need those. So all of these here, we're going to just take these and drag them. So we're going to go down to the switch SD and just drag them into here. So that'll take a little bit. But we're going to put them into the root of the system. So make sure that they are in the root. So right when you go into it, here they all are. So once this is done, we'll continue downloading some Homebrew apps. We're also going to need a couple of other things installed. We're going to need signature patches for Atmosphere, which are right here. They're made by iTotalJustice. And these are for the current firmware of this video, which is 13.1 and Atmosphere 1.2.4. Make sure that you have signature patches for your right version, because if you have signature patches that are too old, they're not going to work for you. And these are basically just so that you can play your game dumps from your game card and have them on your Switch and play them, because if you don't, it'll say that the game is corrupted, or it just won't let you play at all. So make sure that you have these downloaded. These are a little harder to find. So download one or the other. They're both the same, as you can see, but since we're using Fuse, we'll just download the Fuse one. So once you have these, just extract them all. And we're going to open our Switch SD in another window here. So now that we have Fuse downloaded, we can just take these two and drag them into the root here. So you can see it's in the root. Make sure you have it in the root. So these two are changed, as you can see. And this will now have the KIP patches and the EXEFS patches. And the bootloader should also have this patches.ini file in here now as well. So now that it has both of these two, we can start adding some more of the Homebrew files that we need. The next thing we're going to download is the installer for our games, which is named Awoo installer. This is a great installer for NSP, NSC, XCI, and XCZ files. This NSP is the eShop format, the XCI is the game card format, and then these two SZ and CZ formats, just the compressed versions, and it can just add all of them. So it's overall the best installer that you can find, and it's compatible with that USB installer that we had before. So we're going to go to releases here and download the most current release that there is. So I'm going to download this. And while this is downloading, we're also going to grab this 90 DNS tester that we mentioned earlier. And this is just going to do the check to make sure that Nintendo servers are still being blocked. And that's going to be part of our Homebrew as well. So we're going to go to releases here. And this is the 90 DNS tester, not in a zip file. So we're going to have to make sure we put that in the correct place. The next thing we're going to get is tinfoil. Tinfoil was the best way to download XCI files and NSC files or NSP files, but the USB installer for it I can't really get to work, and it's not very good. So I don't really like using this. It's good for downloading games that you have on your Switch already, but the other Awoo installer is good for that as well, and it can work with USB. And if you have games that are bigger than 4 gigabytes, you can't really have that option. So tinfoil is going to be installed for being able to play earlier games than you're supposed to, because the Switch has something in it that does not let you play older updates of games that you have played already, just to keep your save file from being corrupted or anything like that. So this is going to allow us to play older versions of games. So we're going to download this applet version here, this NRO. And the last thing that we're going to get is Retroarch. So Retroarch is the way to play all of the emulated games. So we're going to have this downloaded so we can play all of our emulators and have them in one app. So in order to get this, we have to go to download. And once that's done, we're going to download stable. So that's all the way at the bottom. So right here is the download for the switch. So we're just going to use, hit the download button, and that will download this 7-zip archive here. So we're just going to wait for all these to download, and then once they download, we're going to extract them and put them in the right places on the SD card. So now that we have everything downloaded, we're going to go to the downloads where we have everything. So all these are here, and we're going to have to put these in the correct places. So I'm going to have this open. They're all going to go, since they're Homebrew apps, they're going to go into the switch folder. And this has all of these NRO files or folders that have the NRO in them. Both of them work. So we're going to have this Awoo installer and extract this one. And this is going to go, it's already in the switch folder to tell you which one to put it in. So you can just drag this onto the switch SD here, and it'll put it in the right place for you. The next one we're going to do is this tinfoil applet. So once this is installed here, you can see this is also in the switch. So just download. Once this is extracted, put this onto the root of your SD card. It'll put it in the right place. It'll merge the switch folder with the other switch folder that's already on it. And this switch 90 DNS tester isn't like that, so we're going to put that onto here as well. And once this is on, this is still going to be going. But once you put this on, just drag this onto the switch folder. Put it in the switch folder, just like how the other NRO files are in the switch folder. So if it's in a folder or it's in here, it's going to work either way. These are usually don't have any extra files, so the ones that are out of the folders are by themselves, they're going to be okay. The ones in the folders, sometimes they have extra files, like this one has some extra files, so that one's in the folder for a reason. And the last one is going to be Retroarch. So this is a 7-zip file, so make sure you have a WinRAR or 7-zip to extract it. I recommend WinRAR, it's just a lot better. So extract the files here. You can right click and hit extract files, and just hit OK because it'll be in the same file system. This will take a while because there's going to be a lot of stuff to extract. It actually has all of the emulators that are in it. In some other things like the PS4, you have to download the cores separately, but this has all the cores with it. So you can just extract this and put it on your SD card, and it'll have all of them already on it, so you don't need to download anything extra once this is done, which is very nice. Okay, so now that it's downloaded, we have this RetroArch folder here. So this is going to have the RetroArch switch and RetroArch.jpg. So we're going to just drag all three of these. It's going to need its own folder on the root, so that's what the RetroArch is for. So just copy all of these onto the root of your SD card as well. It's 1.96 gigabytes for all this stuff, so this might take a while. Another thing that's good to do is add your ROMs for RetroArch. As you can see, I have a ROMs folder here, and I have a couple ROMs here. Some are for Dreamcast, this is for GameCube. You can add additional files, like you can have a GameCube file, master file, or a Dreamcast master file, just to have them more organized. But you can organize it however you want, because you'll have to go in through RetroArch and pick out the games individually. They don't have to be a specific format, but it's good to have them in a ROMs folder just so you know where they are. So if you have a ROMs folder, it'd be good right now to also, while your Retroarch is downloading, is put them also in here as well. As you can see, I already have them on here. So this is all set up, and it should be all set up now with everything that we need to get started with the jailbreak. Okay, so now that we have our SD card set up, we're going to get our switch ready to get its first payload injected. So the first thing we're going to do is completely turn off our switch. So if you hold in the power button and go to power options and turn off your switch, so it has to be off and not in sleep mode. And then you're going to want to take that USB-C cable and plug that USB-C cable into the computer and into your switch, like this. And we're also going to take our SD card and put that back into the switch as well. If it turns your switch back on, then like it did here, just do the turn off again. So just hold the power button and turn it off again. It might, because it'll think it's charging. So we're going to take our SD card and plug that back into the switch. So now our switch is off, and we're ready for our first payload injection. So the first thing we're going to do for the payload injection is we're actually going to set up the console into RCM mode. To set our console up into RCM mode, we're going to take our switch console, take this right side of the console, it must be the right side, and take the Joy-Con off. And it's hard to see with this, but at the very bottom there's a bunch of pins for the Joy-Con to connect to the switch. We're going to take our RCM jig here and open this up, take the jig out, and these come in a couple styles. This one has a little like on and off, and this one, it shows this on off here. Make sure you have the little pins here have to go, the ones that stick out have to go facing outward, so facing this way. So you see the pins are here, they have to face outward on the switch. So when you put it in, you slide it in like you're sliding in a Joy-Con. So like this. And I apologize, it's hard to see, but you have it right here, and you just push it down until it clicks in. And once it's clicked in, that means it's good. So it's bridging the 1 and 10 pins, which is how we get into our RCM mode. So now we have to take the top power button and hold in this power button. And while we're holding it in, we just click on the power button. So hold up the volume up button like this, and then click the power button once. So usually hold the power button, or the volume up button, I'm sorry, hold the volume up button for 3 seconds, and then tap the power button, and then that will get the console into RCM mode. And we'll be doing that a couple times. And it won't look any different, it'll just look like a black screen, but it will be in RCM mode, and our program will tell us if our console is in RCM mode or not. So now that we have our SD card and our switch set up, we're going to open up our payload injector to inject our first payload of custom firmware. So we're going to go back to our SD setup, and our PC folder has the programs that we need, and we're going to use TEGRA RCM GUI. If you don't have Windows, then you're going to be using the other program for this. You're going to be using the Fusee loader. So if you have that, then just open that one up instead. So we're going to open up TEGRA RCM GUI, and then it's going to say RCM OK. If it is not in RCM mode, it'll say RCM off, and it'll be red. So just remember to hold up that volume up button and the power button. So hold up the volume up button for 3 seconds, and then just tap the power button, and that should put it in RCM mode. Just make sure you have that RCM jig in, because it will not be able to go into RCM mode without it. And if it's not going into RCM mode, just keep trying it. It will work eventually. Sometimes it is a little finicky with that. So now we can see there's a bunch of favorites here. And these are going to be older than the ones that we actually need. So we can just get rid of these. And we're going to let it go or direct it to our payloads. So we're going to go to this SD card setup and go to the payloads folder, and we have all 3 payloads here. So this is the fuse.pin. We'll open this up, and this will add it to favorites so that we can have easy access for it later. So we'll add this, and these linger past shutting the program down, so they'll be permanently locked into favorites, which is nice. So we have this Fuse, Hekate, and Lockpick, and we're going to start with Lockpick. So to inject the payload, we're going to click on this and then hit Inject Payload. Or an easier way is just to double click it and it will inject the payload for you. So when we do inject the payload, make sure it is in RCM mode. And we're going to inject the Lockpick RCM. It will say something like uploading payload, smashing the stack, and stack smashed with XXX, like random number setup, and then payload successfully injected. It'll say that all down here. Whether your switch is patched or not, it will always say this. Every switch can go into this RCM mode, and every switch can get a payload injected successfully, per se. But there is a way to tell here on the switch if it's patched or not. If you have been in the orange and been watching this video, this is what will tell you if your switch is patched or not. If you're in the green, this will be guaranteed to work for you, so you won't have to worry. But if you're in the orange range, this will determine if your switch is patched or not. If it says smash the stack with a 0x random number setup, so it'll have random number after it, then that means you're good, and you should see something on the screen, which means your switch is unpatched and it's good for jailbreaking. If it says smash the stack with a 0x0000 byte setup and nothing shows up on your screen, then unfortunately your switch is patched and you cannot jailbreak your switch. It will still say it's green and that it injected, but it won't work for you if it's 0x0000 byte setup. And if you went through the video with an orange unknown console and your console is unfortunately patched, then I highly recommend, like I said before going online, looking for a console in the green range. My original console was in the orange and it turned out to be patched, so I went out and bought another one that was in the green, and as you'll see, it works perfectly. So when we hit the payload and inject payload, or we double tap it like this, it will show this smashing the stack with this 7000 byte setup. It will be a random number as long as it's not 0000. That means you'll be good. And as you'll see, we'll have something on the screen for our switch. So as you can see, the payload injection was successful. We have this colorful lockpick.rcm on our screen. And at this point, we're not going to ever need to put it into RCM mode again for setting it up. So we can take this little jig out of the console and put our Joy-Con back in, but we will need to keep it plugged in for later. You can unplug it at this point, but I would just leave it plugged in for now. But for the sake of showing you what's on the screen, it'll make it easier for me to just unplug it. So as you can see, it's Lockpick RCM, and the way to control this is the volume up and volume down buttons go up and down, and the power button is basically the enter button. So what we're going to do is hit dump from sysNAND, the first option. Just hit the power button like this, and as you can see, it dumped everything. It dumped this switch in the SD card, the switch folder, the prod.keys, which is what we're going to need, and the title.keys. So now that this is all done and dumped, it should only take, like I said, 1 second, like you saw, and then just hit the power button again to go back to the menu. And now what we're going to do is hit reboot to RCM and then hit the power button again. and that's going to reboot it to RCM. So we won't actually have to reboot it or do any of the RCM stuff. We can just hit reboot to RCM, and all the payloads will let us do this, so we won't actually need the jig again. It was just for the one-time setup. When you do have the switch, if it ever turns off while you're using Homebrew, you'll have to do it again. But as long as you have this RCM option, you won't have to do any of the jig stuff again, just the first time. Okay, so now that our switch is back into RCM mode, I'm going to plug it back in, and it's going to show up the RCM OK. And this process, dumping the keys and dumping the system NAND, is just going to be for safety, in case something happens that bricks your console or something goes really, really bad. And I've never heard of this happening. I've never had it happen to me. But this is a just in case something happens. It's much better to be safe than sorry. So if something ever does happen, you'll be able to very easily save your switch by having this original system NAND backup so it doesn't stay a brick. You'll be able to bring it back to its full functionality. So now we're actually going to boot up another payload, and this one is going to be the Hekate payload. So if you just double click this, it's going to do the same thing with a 7-byte setup. And the payload is successfully injected, and it'll show up on your switch screen then. So now that we're back on the switch, we can see that we have this Hekate payload set up. And if your console ever turns back on during this process, and it doesn't stay in RCM mode, then just do the same thing that we did at the beginning, power it off, and do the volume up and hit the power button again. It's not a big deal, but it can happen, so just make sure that you do have it in RCM mode before you inject the payload, or you're not going to have the payload injection successful. So now that we're in Hekate, we can set up the date and time. It's not really necessary to do, so we're just going to hit done for now. When you do set up that date and time, it will stay permanent. It's not a big deal that it's wrong. It's just for when you're in this payload. So what we're going to do here is set up our SD card with the NAND dump, the system NAND dump. So if we go to the top here, there's this Tools tab, and then Backup eMMC right here. And we're going to do a couple things. So this eMMC boot 0 and boot 1, we're going to back that up. And this shouldn't take too long to do. So it's going to check for some free space, and then it's going to boot it up or dump it. And then that will be part of the dump for our system NAND then. Okay, that only took about 10 seconds. So that wasn't taking too long. So once this is done, you can tap close here. And now we're going to do this, which is going to take a while, the raw GPP. And this raw GPP is going to take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. And it's just something you have to wait for. It depends on the speed of your SD card, how long it takes. But it's something important to do, just to make sure in case anything happens. So it's highly recommended to do this. So you're just going to have to wait for this process to finish. So after a little over 20 minutes, I completed the NAND backup. Just something to note, I actually had to use a second SD card that I had, because the first SD card that I had, it had an error about 80% of the way through. It had a non-match error. And I guess that's because the first SD card that I used wasn't a very good SD card. So I recommend that you get one of those good SD cards like I mentioned, or you're going to be getting errors like that with loading games and loading any software for you. So I'd recommend getting some good SanDisk or Samsung SD card, something like that from a good company. So another thing to note too is I didn't explain what the system NAND was. That's basically just the operating system, like how you have Windows or Mac or Linux. It's just the operating system for the Switch itself, so that it can load all the games and programs and stuff. So that's going to be about 30 gigabytes when you have that fully loaded on. As you can see, it's about 29 gigabytes. So now that this is done, we can actually close this and go back to the menu, the home, and hit reboot and reboot into RCM mode, so we don't have to do anything with the jig. So now that it's off, we're going to take our SD card and we're going to connect it back to the computer. So now that our switch backup is on our SD card, we're going to take our SD card here, and this backup folder has the contents of it. So in here, this has our switch backup. So make sure you have this folder put somewhere specific that you'll remember. You could put it back in our Switch Games folder here if you want to. I already have it backed up, so I don't have to do this step because I already have it, but make sure you have this in a safe place. Again, it is 29.1 gigabytes. It's going to be about 29 gigabytes, so make sure you have a little bit of time because it will take a little while to transfer to your computer. Once your backup is backed up to your computer in a safe place, we're actually going to delete it from the SD card, so make sure that it is backed up and it's all saved. So we won't need it anymore because that'll just be taking up 30 gigabytes of unnecessary space for us. So once that's done, we're actually going to have all of this, and we're going to back this all up into our Switch game folder, because we're going to be reformatting our SD card or adding another partition for our emulated NAND. And sometimes it asks to delete the entire SD card, and sometimes it doesn't. So just to make sure, we're going to have all this stuff. Make another Switch folder, maybe like Switch SD backup or something. SD backup, and we're gonna have all this stuff transfer into this. So once these all get transferred, then we can be safe to put this back in to make a new partition for emulated NAND. So now that all of our folders in our Switch SD card are backed up, as long as they're safely backed up, we're going to take out our SD card and put it back into our Switch. And we're going to make sure that that USB-C is connected again. And we're going to inject it with Hekate for the last time. So this will be the final time, the final preparation before we can have our Switch ready for its homebrew. So just inject the Hekate payload, and if it works, then we're going to go back to our Switch and do the final setup. So now that we're back on the Hekate payload, we're going to make a partition for our emulated NAND and then create the emulated NAND. So we're going to go to Tools and Partition SD card. And then this will show it should only be one partition now. And we're going to see that there's this MMC, and we're going to drag it about halfway until it says this 29 full. So that's going to be the 29 gigabytes then for our emulated NAND. So once you drag it to this 29 full, hit next step. And this will be, the files will be wiped, as you can see. So that's why we back it up first. And then we hit start. And it will do a little safety because it will delete everything on the SD card. So make sure you have it all backed up. So now it asks us to push the power button to continue. So now it's going to format it, and it's done. So everything should be deleted minus the stuff for this homebrew, or this payload. That will keep that. So now we can close it and go back to home. And now we're going to go to EmuMMC and create EmuMMC right here. And when we do, we're going to choose our SD partition and this part 1 here. And it's going to start the process of creating our EmuMMC. So it will take about the same time that it takes to back up the the regular system NAND to make the EmuNAND. So it will be about 20 minutes or more, depending on your SD card speed. I'd always recommend getting a faster SD card because downloading games will be quicker and doing this kind of stuff will be quicker. But after that, it doesn't really matter as long as you have one that works well for you. So it just finished making our EmuNAND. Took about 17 minutes. So now that that's done, we can close out of this. And you can see now instead of missing or removed, it says enabled. So we have our EmuNAND successful. And now when we are back here, we can hit reboot and reboot into RCM. And now we are rebooting into RCM mode. So we're going to take out our SD card and put it back into our computer. And we're going to take all of our files that we backed up and just put them back on the SD card. And then we can boot up into our custom firmware. Now that we have our switch SD back into our computer for the last time, you should see 2 partitions instead of 1. This one should be saying something like not accessible, or Windows will say, do you want to format it? Don't format it, because this is our partition for the switch. If you do, you're going to ruin your EmuNAND because it'll reformat and delete all of it. So just never format it if it ever pops up. This we're never going to touch anymore because this is going to be purely for the switch system. We're going to be able to use this one though, and this will be the remainder of our data. So it should be around 90 gigabytes since we have 120 gigs inside of it. So this will be for the rest of our stuff. So if you get your switch files that you saved before, we're going to drag them back into our switch SD. And then once that's done, our switch is going to be ready to boot into our custom firmware and we'll be good for jailbreaking. Now that all our original files are back on our SD card, we can take out our SD card and put it back into our switch and connect that USB-C back up into it. And we're going to add in our final payload. And that payload is going to be the Fusee payload. So we're going to go back into our TEGRA RCM GUI. It says the RCM OK, make sure it says that of course. And now we're going to inject the Fusee, and this Fusee payload is what we're always going to be injecting now to get our switch into a quick boot up into Homebrew. So we're going to double click that and it will boot our switch into Atmosphere. So our switch has booted back up, and as we can see, it looks pretty relatively the same, but there is a way to check if you are running custom firmware, and that's right here. So it'll show your current version. It shows AMS 1.2.4, that's Atmosphere, and then the E on the end is the important thing. So that shows that we are in our emulated NAND. So we did run that successfully, so that's good. And another thing that we can do to check that we're in Homebrew is go to the album. And as you can see, we have all of our Homebrew apps right here ready for us to go into. We are going to be going into 90 DNS test right now, right when we go in before we do anything else, just to make sure that everything is still blocked. So when you go in, it just does it for you, which is good. So everything looks blocked. If it's red, then I would turn off your internet immediately. I would not use this console while you're connected to the internet then. But doing this, it makes sure that you can still be connected to the internet. Like I said before, I'm not responsible if your console does get banned, but I am going to tell everything to you to make sure that you have all the steps in place to have your console safe from being banned from Nintendo. So you can just push B. And this is actually the applet mode, as you can see on the top here. And this is a lower RAM usage version of this, so some of these Homebrew apps will not actually work correctly in this lower RAM version of the installer. So we're gonna have to use a separate method once we get a game on here, and that's by holding R and you go into one of your games. It will go into the proper, I guess, Homebrew menu where you have all of your Homebrew apps at the full RAM like you're using a game, and they will all work correctly then. So we're going to start the process of getting one of our games installed. So what we're going to do is go into the album, or go into an app and hold the R button and go into the Awoo installer. And you can see Apple mode not supported, but it does work for the most part. But for bigger games, I would definitely use the regular mode. But for our first game, we're going to install a small game just so that we have a game that we can use the regular Homebrew menu with. So this lets us install from the SD card. If we want, you can just go in and select a file that way. And you can install over the LAN or internet. That's a little more complex, but today I'm just going to teach you how to install over USB. It's very simple, doing it with the USB program. So we're going to do that. All you have to do is just push A button and then A again while your USB is connected. So we're going to go back to computer and get the USB program set up. So here we have two different types of games. This one is an NSP file for Castle Crashers. This is the eShop format. So this one we can just install, but the other format that we have is a split XCI file. So this one is two different kinds of XCI files. This is an XC0 and an XC1, and these are split. So we're going to have to merge them together. As you can see, this is the 4 gigabytes because the FAT32 can only support that much, and then this is the remainder. So we're going to download a tool to be able to put that back together, which is called XCI Cutter, and this can trim and merge XCI files together. So we're just going to save this here, and now that's downloaded, we can open it up. And now go to Uncut and Join. And make sure you go to the Mario and Kingdom Battle. Just make sure they're in the same folder. And make sure they're in a folder that doesn't have other XCI files that are split, or else it might get confused. So now we'll just put them, we'll have it output in the same folder. And then we'll just hit Uncut. And once it's done, it should be its own XCI file. And if you have a split NSP file, we have our downloader to download it to our switch that can actually uncut the NSP files in its own program. So we'll be able to do that as well. So as you can see, it made this XCI file. It made it pretty large actually, but it won't even matter because we have the USB. So when we do have it together, we won't need these files anymore. So we're going to go back here and then go back to the SD setup on the PC, and then this TEGRA RCM, we're going to go instead of this to this NS-USBLoader, and then the jar. And wait for it to load. Okay, so we have this kind of menu here. Make sure you select Awoo instead of gold leaf, and then USB. So the first thing we're going to do is this download and install drivers. So you'll need these for it to connect to the us and recognize the switch. So you're going to just download these. It might take a little bit to download, but it shouldn't take too long. So you're just going to wait till it pops up. And then this is just another Windows pop-up. It says, do you want to run drivers.exe? Just hit OK or yes. And then this will go through the installation wizard. So you just hit next and then finish. And there you go, you have your drivers. So now what we're going to do is select our files. So we have our Castle Crashers here. We're going to open that. And we have, so that's our NSP file, and we have this Kingdom Battle. So we're going to open that as well. And we're going to upload to Nintendo Switch. So make sure you have on your Nintendo Switch, you have the switch on the install over USB, and you have it plugged in. So we're going to plug this in to the computer just so it can detect it. And then when you're ready, you just hit this upload to NS here. And if it's not plugged in, it will fail. So when you plug it in, you just hit this and it will start. So we'll go back to the switch to show what to do on that. Okay, so now that it's going over uploading, we just hit install over USB. And now you can see them both. So you just hit the Y button. And then this plus on the top of the right Joy-Con. And then hit SD card. And if it does say invalid NCA signature, they're your games, so they'll be fine. So you say, yes, I understand the risks. If that happens with a XCI file that's improperly signed for some reason, it'll be fine. You just hit yes, I understand the risk. That's just for people that maliciously put bad programs on when they upload their dumps online. So if it's your own dumps, you don't have to worry about that. You're not going to get a virus from your own game dump. So just hit OK there, and then you'll just have to wait for the process to complete. Alright, so we have both of them installed. So now we can just hit exit and go back. And as you can see, we have both games on our home menu. And because of our signature patches, we can go into any of them. This one isn't on the current update. And it detects it that it's not because it's still online. But as you can see, it does load right in. If we didn't have those signature patches, it would not load in. So this works just fine. Which is good for us, but we can also we can close this, and this will allow us to go into our full menu. So if we go in and we hold the R button in a game, by holding the R button, we'll be able to go into our home menu, and usually, as you'll see that that there is no little applet mode, because this is going to be the full version of the Homebrew menu. So that's how you get to the full menu, and you can go into one of these apps. Then let's say we'll go into Gold Leaf. And that will work for us now. So that's really handy. And then if we leave and go back in, it'll just go back into this. And if we just go to exit an app, I guess this one doesn't work, but if you go to exit an app, it'll go back to the menu too. So every time you go back into this app, until you close the software, it'll just go back into the menu, which is really nice. So the next thing we're going to do is extract one of our game cards, or dump one of our game cards. So we're going to have this Total Justice game card installer. So when we go into it, it will show a picture of whatever game we have inserted. And then we have this NAND install and SD card install. And we're going to, every time we download a game, you can pick either the system NAND to download it to or the SD card. I'd recommend just putting it on the SD card as it makes that easier with the EmuNAND. But it's really simple. I actually don't have a game card. I download all my games with the eShop, and then I put it onto my Switch that way. This is just a test Switch that I have for this video. And this game card installer is really simple. You just push the A button here, and then yes, and then yes, and then it will install it to the SD card. So very, very simple, very, very easy. But this is just for game cards. If you want to back up, let's say your system software, you're going to need a different tool. And we have that here, which is NX dump tool. So this is running in applet mode. As you can see, it might have some errors. But if we go to dump installed SD card eMMC content, and also if you don't have the keys file on here, it will also show another error. You make sure that you have your keys file that we got from lockpick.rcm, because this is one of the apps that absolutely needs that keys file to function correctly. So we're going to get this dump installed SD card content. And we have two games here that you're going to see that we install later in this video, and we're going to actually dump one of these games. Even though we're going to install this later in the video through Awoo installer, we can actually dump it too. So we just go to the game that we want, and then hit the NSP dump. This will always dump these eShop games in NSP format, and then it will dump the game card in XCI format. And then this split output dump, you want that because it's FAT32. It's good to verify it. It just makes it easier. You won't get things popping up in a Awoo installer. You want to, I would say yes, remove console specific tat. Data, generate ticket list dump. If you're just backing this up for yourself, this stuff doesn't really matter. But I just hit yes, yes, and yes. And this one, you don't really need this one. So yeah, I would just do this yes, 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 and no. And then we'll show the base output naming scheme, and then you hit the start NSP dump process. And then it will start the process right here. Doesn't take very long. It does depending on the game size. But as you can see, the process successfully completed. Dump verification disabled. Yeah. So hit that. We can actually see our dump now. If we go into the album and we go to this NX shell, that's something that we got earlier. We can go to switch and the NX dump tool here. And this NSP, we can see right here, the base NSP Castle Crasher. So if we go and put our Switch SD card into the computer, we can put multiple NSP files. If they're split, we can use the program to put them together. And if you have multiple XCI files, you can use this program to put them together. And if you want to just install them from the SD card, you always can this way. But you'll have them installed already if you have them dumped. If you have to dump them with this tool, so it's good to just have these put onto your computer to have for later, and then you can just install them again at any time. So that's how you have game dumps for your Switch. One of the other things we can look at is the Homebrew App Store. This does require the internet connection, but this lets you download a bunch of Homebrew apps off of the internet, which is really nice, that are uploaded on here. I downloaded a couple already. I have this for checking turnip prices. This Switch Remote Play lets you play your Switch, play your computer onto your Switch, so you can use basically this as another desktop, mobile desktop for your Windows. And you can use this actually as a Steam player. You can make this a Linux device, but that would require a whole separate video. So I could usually just look up how to do that, because that can be a little complicated. But yeah, this thing can be a full Android machine, and it can be a full Linux machine that can run Steam games, and it can do it actually not that bad. It can't run like crazy AAA games, but it's not very bad running things on Steam through Proton. And there's a bunch of apps here. There's so many apps that you can get. Retroarch is actually on here, so you can just download it using this as well. It just takes a really long time through here because it has to download, so that's why we do it earlier, because it just is a faster download that way. But yeah, there's tons and tons of apps that you can use to download this. So if you do want an app, you can just hit A, it'll give you information, and you just hit download, and it will download the app for you. So that's really nice. And another thing that we can do is close this and get back in here. Just remember, hold the R button when you go into an app to go into here. And this is a way to get our games download. Early in the video I said that you'll need tinfoil for this, but actually I found out that you can use gold leaf for this as well. So if you have an app that displays something like this, which I've had displayed for me before, it won't let you play it unless you get the newest version, and that's if you've had the newer update installed and then deleted the newer update and either not downloaded any updates or just installed an earlier update. You will not be able to play the game. However, this app, Gold Leaf, will let you play the game through one of its many features. So if you hit Explore Content, and then SD card, actually no. If you hit Manage Console Contents, here it is, and SD card, then Castle Crashers Remastered, and Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. So whichever game you want, you just hit A, and A on the base title, and you can hit Reset Launch Version, and that's for both of them. This has everything on it. But if, let's say, if it wasn't letting me go into the game at all for some reason, you can hit this Reset Launch Version, and it sets it back to 0, so it will allow you to play the game now. So instead of showing that must download, like only the download, it'll show the start software and download options. So it will let you play. And it will play, but it will try to still download the update in the background. When you go back, it'll show this little loading screen with the X on it, because it's trying to download the game, but it can't download the update for some reason. The reason why is because we blocked Nintendo server, so it won't do any of that in the background. So once you cancel the update, it won't continue to download the update. There's no way to get it to not try to automatically update your game, but it will let you play it now when you do that. So that's why we have Gold Leaf downloaded. Even though it can only download NSP files, it does let us do that, so that can be very useful. So now we're going to try running some emulators through Retroarch. So we're going to definitely go through using the app. So remember, hold the R button, go into one of your apps, and that will bring up your Homebrew menu. You definitely want to try this out. If it doesn't work for you, we can go to the Homebrew App Store and just get Retroarch from there. So it's no big deal if you can't get it to work off of their official website. Sometimes it doesn't work correctly. So we're gonna try this here, and it works for us. It has all of the cores. If you hit load core, as you can see, it has like MAME, it has Atari, it has a bunch of cores. So this is all of the different consoles that it can play, and it'll automatically detect which one you want if you select your game. Like let's say you select an ISO, it'll ask you of all of the cores that can play ISOs which one you want to pick. So you don't have to hit load core. It'll let you do it for you when you select your game. This lets you load your content, so you can load whichever game you want from your ROMs file or anywhere on your Switch that you have the game. It's just easier to keep it organized if you have a ROMs file. This lets you update the games, or it'll update your cores for your games online, which is really nice. So if you click this, you can just go through the update prompting update. But if you update off of the website, if you download that one, that will be the latest up-to-date one, so you won't have to update until you've been using this for a while. This just gives some system information, so we don't really need to look at that right now. And this is important, the CPU overclock. I would play your games before you overclock, but if you're having some problems with performance or sound or something like that, like especially with N64 or Dreamcast, you definitely want to use the CPU overclock function. So you can do maximum or high, or just boost performance, or you can even power save if you're using something like an NES that doesn't need much power at all. So this will help you power save. So this is good options to have with here. So with what we're gonna do, we're gonna actually boost performance a little bit, and that helps out with some of these emulators. So we're going to boost performance a little bit, and we're going to load content. So like I said, all the cores are on here. You don't have to do anything extra. It's all ready to go. You can just go and select your ROM, so make sure you have your ROMs already on the SD card. So we're going to go to our ROMs folder here, and we have a few games here. I learned, unfortunately, there is no GameCube emulator. You'll have to go download something like Linux and then use the Dolphin emulator on Linux to actually play GameCube on here. And it's not that great because the Switch just doesn't have the processing power to run something like Dolphin very well. You can still do it on some lower end games like Animal Crossing or something, but it's a lot harder to run something like that, and there is no GameCube emulator on this version of Retroarch. And actually, there is none anywhere that I could find for the Switch currently, so if you want to play GameCube, you'll be out of luck unless you're using something like Linux. But we have a couple Dreamcast emulators here, or Dreamcast games, so we're going to play Echo the Dolphin.
and this is a .cdi file, and it knows that .cdi is always Dreamcast, so when you hit A, it'll just automatically go into it. So I'll turn the volume up a little bit. So you can see it is running. And it does run very, very well. I'm very impressed with it. So just gonna go through these screens. Unfortunately, we can't skip these screens. But it's almost unloading. And you can use your connected Joy-Cons and stuff. And you can change the controls. How to get to the menu is you push the plus and the minus at the same time. And you can see we have the menu, so we can save states or load states, can rewind. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Change shaders. You can do a lot of different things here, and you can change the controls as well. If you go into the settings, it changes with input here. You can change what each one functions with the games. This is turbo settings, port 1 controls. Yeah, so here would be like port 1 controls. And you can change, you can actually use other controllers with this too, which is nice. Other Bluetooth controllers. But you can see you can change all of these controls. So if you don't like how it controls your game, like this A is B and B is A, so I can change that for just this game if I wanted to. So we're gonna go back into the game by just pushing that again. We'll continue. It's gonna load. And as you can see, it runs really well, especially for being a 3D game like this. But Dreamcast emulators are usually really, really good. So this is just it running. Yeah, so it runs really good. N64 runs really good as well. It might need some overclocking to make it run good, but that's why we have that option. So yeah, I haven't really had any problems with any games. They've all ran really well with overclocking. Yeah, I'm really happy with this. You can play tons of different emulators on here. You can play everything that's listed here. So we're actually going to go back to the game here. I'm going to exit here. And if you want to leave Retroarch, don't go back to the menu like this and just quit it, because it might not save properly, and it might not save your settings that you set. So I would go to the option to quit Retroarch like that. That just gives it a safer way to quit. So but it has all of these cores here, so all of these games it can play. It can play all of these consoles, so, and it does them all very, very well. I'm very impressed with this emulator. So I highly recommend it. There's some other emulators out there, but this one covers pretty much everything. So once you have this, you won't really need anything else. So yeah, that's basically emulating on the Switch.
So you might be wondering, well, what do we do if we don't have a computer around and we want to install our payload onto our Switch? And they actually make a product for that that lets us do that mobily. So we won't need a computer at all to inject our payloads and boot our Switch into RCM mode. And that just makes it easier for us to inject payloads and just have access to Jailbreak on the fly wherever we want.
So this is the RCM loader. This is a good, easy way to be able to inject your payloads. It'll look like this. It's very small, and it just plugs right into your Switch device, and it will inject the payloads without actually having to need a computer, which is really nice. So you can just do this kind of thing on the go. And it actually has 6 slots for 6 different payloads. So as you can see here, this is like a magenta. If you click it once, it shows you what current payload you're on. And each color represents a different payload. So if I hold it in, we'll change to different payloads. Like that's like a teal blue. This one's like a, it's hard to see in the video. This is a regular blue. That's a green. So each one's a different payload. So when I plug this in, it will just inject the payload as long as I'm in RCM mode, which is really, really nice. There's a little guide on the website too that I'll link that shows which colors correspond to which ones that you have downloaded onto this thing. And it's really easy to put them on. You just plug this in. It comes with this USB cable. It's just a micro USB. So you just plug this in. It's like a USB. It acts as an SD card. That's what it pops up as. So you could just drag and drop the payloads into this thing, and it'll just upload them. But there is a bug with this one specifically. There's 2 different versions of this. One comes with like a clear case that says RCM loader that looks a little nicer, and this is like a newer one that comes with just this white box. And this one specifically, the old one doesn't have this problem, but this new one, something they changed something, and Hekate 5.6 will not be able to upload to this thing for some reason. So we're actually going to download and update before we actually inject payloads with this, so that we won't have any problems injecting the payload. So we're going to go onto this website here, xkit.xyz support. This is who makes the RCM loader, and they have a fix for that weird error with Hekate payload. It's Hekate atmosphere, so it won't load any atmosphere or Hekate, so we're definitely going to want to get this fixed for ours. So we're just going to download it, and for some reason my browser is really weird, so I have to enter here, and now we're good. So we can show it in folder, extract it, and now we have this RCM loader 1+ update tool. So I'm going to just hit run anyway, don't worry, it's safe. Now that this is running, this has to run first, and then we're going to plug in our little RCM loader. So once you have the RCM loader update tool up and ready, we're gonna have to plug this thing in. And doing this correctly is really tricky, because you have to plug it in and push the plus button at like the exact same time. So you hold in the plus button a little bit and then plug it in, and it has to be specific. So if it's like this and it's showing it and it's just glowing, you didn't do it right. Or if it doesn't show up at all, you didn't do it right as well. So you have to get ready to plug it in, and
As you can see, I didn't get it right that time either. It's really hard. I don't know why they made it so hard. It's very precise, but you only have to do it one time at least. So there it is. All right, so now that it's flashing purple, it's like a blue and green, we can go back to the computer and we can update it. So now it shows up as connected, and all we have to do is just hit download. And this will reflash the chip to the new firmware. So I hit pass, and that means we're good. So we can exit, we can go back to the to here, and actually will still be flashing blue and green, so you have to unplug it and plug it back in, and then the files will show up. And I'm gonna just check it while it's off, but it's showing up good. Like it's not having any problems getting to the payload. So if it is having a problem, back these up here, back them up, your payloads, and then hit format and format this to FAT, and then go here and download these folders and extract them to the root of your SD card. So they'll look like here, but this will be like the more updated Atmosphere and Reinks and SX loader. So it's a good idea to do this because of something that we're going to go over later. With this, it seems like it's only going to get one payload at a time, which I'll explain when we get to that part. So I updated this successfully, but for some reason, after updating it, it'll only let me select one. And if I try to change it, it'll say green. It'll just be this green. So it, for some reason, it loses its like selection functionality. However, it does let you boot up into the newer versions of Atmosphere. So I guess you don't really need any other payloads because this is just like if your switch dies to boot it up into what you want. So this, it won't change from the first one, the blue. So this will just be the one that's put in, which is Atmosphere. And if you don't want that one, you can swap to a different payload on here. So it'll just inject a whatever specific payload you want. You just can't switch it for some reason after you update it. But we have this turned off and in RCM mode. So you can see we plug this in, put it in RCM mode. It will shine blue. And as you can see, as Atmosphere starts booting, we can take this out. Once it stops shining blue, we can take it out. And now we are in with Atmosphere booting into this, which is actually really nice. So we have this like mobile payload injector that we can just use anywhere at any time. So, and you have the RCM jig built into that as well. So it's a nice handy thing to have. It's kind of a pain to work with the whole updating thing, but it is a nice buy to get. It's not necessary by any means, but it makes it a lot more convenient for you if your switch is dying and you don't feel like going all the way to your computer to hook it back up. You can just take this over and you'll have it able to boot up from any payload anywhere, which is really nice. And that's about everything for this video. I'm going to be making a second video on this. I'm going to be covering some things like NetPlay, which lets you play online with other players that have jailbroken switches that can't connect to Nintendo servers, which is really, really nice. So if you have friends that have jailbroken switches, you can play with them online with mods and stuff like that. It's really nice. I'm going to be showing some NX themes installer. I'm going to be showing how to do that.
and how to install custom themes because they look very nice on the Switch. I'm going to be showing this Switch Remote Play, which basically lets you play your Windows games, or it lets you project your computer onto here, so you can use your computer from your tablet, which is really, really nice, and vice versa. So you can project your Switch onto the computer. And the last thing is some modding. I'm going to be showing some game mods, specifically one that gives 60 FPS to some games that don't have that option, like Luigi's Mansion, which is also really nice to show it. There's something similar like that to PlayStation, and it's really nice to be able to have that option for Switch games. So I'll cover those things in the next episode that I make, but I think this covers about the basics for the Switch jailbreaking and everything you need to know for the basic level. So I hope you enjoyed watching. Maybe give the video a like, comment if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer them. And thank you for checking out the channel. I hope you enjoy your jailbroken Switch.